I'd like to welcome you to City Hall. My name is Krista McCosh, and I'm the Disability Commissioner and ADA Title II Coordinator for the city. We're here today with a very exciting and important announcement about increasing housing policies for people with disabilities in Boston. It's a first step, but it's an important step. We recently completed a report by the Disability Housing Task Force to look at increasing opportunities for people with mobility and communication disabilities in the city. So many departments worked on this report for over 2 years. We collaborated with the Office of Neighborhood Services, the Human Services Cabinet, ISD, Do It, and many other city departments have worked on this to bring it to fruition. But it's only been possible with the support of Mayor Walsh.
And Mayor Menino, too.
Sorry, but and Mayor Menino, yes. When the mayor was elected almost 4 years ago, he immediately began assessing the needs of Boston. And one thing was strikingly clear. There was a need to improve equity and increase opportunities for residents, particularly in housing. The mayor has always supported my commission and prioritized the work that I do. And the policies we are announcing today represent the mayor's promise to increase equity and opportunity for people with disabilities in Boston. So now I'd like to introduce the mayor, Martin J. Walsh.
Thank you, Commissioner. I want to first of all thank the Commissioner. Kristen has done an incredible job and has been, it makes it easy for us to talk about policies and making sure accessibility is a top priority of ours. And I want to thank the Commissioner for her great work. I also want to thank members of the Disability Housing Task Force. Thank you for what you've done. Thank you for being part of this. This is an important day today here in the city, particularly off of a conversation we had, and Sheila will talk a little bit about it, and I will as well, about housing numbers that we have in the city. I want to thank the different city departments and agencies that collaborated on this work. This work is never easy, but when you have a collaboration and people willing to sit down and talk and work, I want to thank everyone for doing that. And I want to also thank you all for the work that you're going to keep doing in the months to come. So the task force is over. I don't know if it's over, but the work's been done there. But now it's the implementation. That's important. You know, by having a great meeting and talking about what our goals are. If we don't hit our goals, then we did it really for naught. And I want to thank you for keeping pressure on us for this. It's a great city. It certainly should be home for everybody. At a time of high demands and high costs, making this vision a reality has been a priority of my administration. We released our housing plan in 2014. That was to create new housing, 53,000 units of new housing by the year 2030. We're also dedicated to meeting that goal. When we talk about how we want to grow as a city, the numbers released this morning show very strong progress. Nearly 22,000 new homes are either completed or in construction. 40% of those homes are low or middle income homes, which I think is a very big number. In the second quarter of this year alone, we issued permits to almost 1,700 units, the most of any quarter on record. Overall, we are 94% of our target rate for low-income units, and there's more to come. Our inclusionary development policy is turning this production into millions of dollars for affordable housing, something that we're able to do working with the big realtors in the city of Boston, the big landowners in the city of Boston, to let them know that we need help here, and we've been able to do that. We have the CPA, the Community Preservation Act, that was passed, and many of you were advocating and campaigning for it. I want to thank you for that. We're able to pass that, and that's going to add even more money to our housing, but also to parks, so we can make our parks more accessible, and to historic preservation, where we can make our historic sites more accessible. So it's important for us as we put that money in there, we think about that. Our housing lab is exploring new strategies. But the plan that we're talking about is more than just hitting numbers. It's about meeting real people's needs. And that's what equity means. And it's the only way that we can serve everyone here and everyone fairly in the city of Boston. And it's the only way that we can reach our city's potential. Bostonians with disabilities contribute enormously to the community and to our economy. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, about 75,000 people, or nearly 12% of the Boston population, have a disability or or one type or another. Not counting seniors, we have 22,000 Bostonians with mobile disabilities, 9,800 with visual disabilities, 7,400 people with hearing disabilities. Accessibility to housing is their fundamental need, is our fundamental need. That means accessibility to housing is one of our city's top priorities. In our housing plan, we're committed to better understand these needs, and we're committed to establishing a production goal and procedures to make it easier for people with disabilities to secure and stay in accessible housing. That's what the work of this task force is all about. It started 18 months ago. We saw there was a need for the city to do more, much more. We brought in the right people together. Many of you are in this room today, and again, I want to thank you. In today's announcement, we're announcing new policies that are a direct result of the work. They fall under 3 different goals. Number 1, increase the supply of accessible housing for people with disabilities, which is obviously key. Number 2, improving outreach to make sure people who know about homes and the resources out there. So making sure that we find the people that don't understand and don't know that City Hall is there for them. Number 3, increase support services to ensure stable housing for people with disabilities. So not just simply finding housing, but making sure it's stable housing with services that people can have, something that's important for us. The specific policies we announced today will advance each of these goals. They're going to include doubling the number of accessible units in new housing developments that the city funds. Moving towards a new requirement on private developers through the Boston Planning and Development Agency, and they're here with us today. The Secretary of the Planning Agency is here with us today. Create a resource guide and online information. Increase access to home modification loans so people understand what loans are available for them in their homes today. Launching a new loan fund for family creating an accessory unit for a family member with disabilities to help families that have the space in their homes today that want to create a unit, they'll be able to do that. And expanding our successful housing surge model to focus on people with disabilities. These and other new policies will be implemented in the phases starting now and coordinating through the summer. I want to commend the members of the task force for their energy, their passion, their willingness to have frank conversations with us about how the city can do better. These new policies will go a long way to making Boston more accessible and more equitable. This is not only a vital aspect of our housing plan, this is something long overdue in our society. And it's something I'm honored and grateful to move forward on as mayor. Now, as I said, to my left, I have an incredible woman who works really hard for the disability community in the city of Boston, and also she's a leader in the state. And to my right is another incredible woman leader who is the head of our housing in the city of Boston. And honestly, I can say this, a lot of the policy that we have, that we put forth, Sheila Dillon and her team has put it together, but without Sheila's leadership, we wouldn't be where we are today. So without further ado, Chief of Housing in the City of Boston, Sheila Dillon.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. So I'll be brief, but the mayor's right. About 2 years ago,
I told you.
He's great. About 2 years ago, we put forth our housing plan for the city of Boston with some very ambitious goals. But during that process and right when it was going to press, Kristen McCosh was very, very clear that you cannot put forth a housing plan for the city of Boston and not talk about housing for the disabled community. The needs are too great, the numbers are too great, and if we're going to be a compassionate, wonderful city, this really need to be in there. But we said, Kristen, we're going to press. We're going to press. This has been a long time coming. But we all committed to putting together a really smart task force, come up with very good recommendations, and that's exactly what we did. So I really, I love working with my colleague, Kristen McCosh, and I just want to thank you for your unwavering, very unwavering advocacy. So the mayor's right. We met. We came up with some good recommendations. But I think for me, it was even more than just a set of good recommendations, and it is this, and I'll highlight them, although the mayor did a great job doing that as well. But it also raised the issue for me. I'm chief of housing, and I really benefited from the conversations and keeping this in the forefront of my mind, that while we solve housing for the elderly and solve for the middle class and solved, for the homeless, there's a large population that needs specific special housing, and it needs to be integrated and it needs to be of high quality, but we can never lose sight of that. So it was as beneficial to me as a housing professional, and one of the most beneficial things I've worked on in the last couple of years. But the mayor's right. We are going to any city-funded project that we fund through D&D or others that is an elevated building, we're going to increase. We're going to double the amount of affordable housing required, which is terrific. And the BPDA has been doing a great job, doing a better job as they create these affordable units and private developers, they're going to make more of those accessible. And that is, the mayor's mentioned, it's a great resource. And because of the housing boom, we're getting more and more inclusionary development units. We're going to prioritize projects that come forward and say, we want to develop a goodly number of units for the disabled community. We're going to prioritize those for funding. And they come in through competitive applications. So we want to see developers come in and say, this is important to us, and we're going to increase the numbers. So we're going to be looking for those projects. And we're going to continue, the BPDA is going to continue to use the accessibility checklist, which the Disability Commission and the BPDA put in place, and it's working. And it's not only working, it's making developers more thoughtful, but it's raising consciousness throughout the city. And it's a simple tool, but one that has really dramatically changed how developers are approaching development in the city. I'm glad to see Commissioner Christopher, I forgot your name. How can I forget Buddy's name for even a second? And we're going to work together to catalog all of the accessible units in the city. We don't have a good list. We know that they're 5% in buildings, but we don't know exactly what units those are. So we need to know what they are, so as they come available, we need to get those units into the CHAPA registry so people that are looking for accessible units can more easily find them. And the list goes on and on. This is a start, and we're going to start working tomorrow on implementing these recommendations, but I'm hoping too that as we find new opportunities, we can grow the list of recommendations and act accordingly. So with that, I'm going to hand this over to Bill Henning, and he is the director of Boston Center for Independent Living. And I just want to say, it's been great to get to know Bill over the last 18 months. And Bill has really wanted this report and this awareness to happen. And he too has been a great advocate. And without further ado.
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Kristen, for this initiative, this effort. I would emphasize that housing is probably the biggest concern people with disabilities face in Boston, especially with what happened yesterday in the U.S. Senate. Let's give a cheer to people who got some common sense yesterday in the Senate and didn't move forward with trying to decimate Medicaid. That would have been the biggest concern for people with disabilities in this city, this state, this country. But housing is a real serious issue. We hear it every day. Right now at our office, which is right down at Downtown Crossing, we have 20 people in our office at a housing workshop looking for those very scarce units that are integrated, accessible, and affordable. And when we think of affordability and accessibility, think broadly. A lot of the access is simply vertical access. Someone using a wheelchair like our board members, Zari and Frank and Sergio there, or superstar advocate Olivia, want a fully accessible unit, but many people need to just get in and out of the building. We have lots of old housing stock in the city, as we know. Some of it's very attractive, 3-story buildings, 3-deckers, whatever, in Mattapan, Dorchester, Brighton, across the city. And it's not accessible. And we find folks who end up trapped in their apartments. They stay all day long, or they drag themselves out, some literally on their tails going up and down stairs. And they may not need every accommodation. And this will start in a very methodical way to address some of those concerns, and we're very pleased about that. We will stay on top of this with the city. We think it's a very invaluable partnership. This has been driven by residents of the city. They come into our office, they state the need, our members state it. We've had very receptive people in the city, thanks to them. Thanks for other advocates. I see Barbara Chandler with Metropolitan Boston, MBHP, Metropolitan Boston Housing Partnership, which does a great job for folks. We've worked with CHAPA. Again, I'll call out Sergio, who's from Dorchester, our board chair, Zari from South Boston, Olivia from Brighton, Frank from South Boston. I'm from Hyde Park. This is a citywide initiative to include everybody in the city into the housing world and not have to couch surf, live in shelters, live in nursing homes. We're working with probably 50 folks right now, 60 or under in nursing homes. So this is a great step forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I just want to emphasize too what the mayor and Sheila have said, that it really is going to be an interdepartmental collaboration moving forward. We've worked closely with all the departments involved, and I know some other people who are here today is Commissioner Emily Shea from the Elderly Commission, and I see Alejandra Sanquian from the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Advancement. Again, just saying that moving forward, we'll be working with our Department of Innovation and Technology to get a registry up of the units so that we'll know where to direct people. The mayor established a new Office of Housing Stability in the last year or so, and they're working case management with people who come to us and say, I can't find a place to live. I need an accessible unit. Where do I go? So now under this project, we'll have a resource guide, which we'll be distributing today, and we'll also have an office that can help. So we think with all these steps, and like Bill just said, we need to think broadly about access. Part of our work with the BPDA is with the accessibility checklist to have the developers show us their access, show us the vertical access, show us the entrances. Can people get into every unit in the building, even if it's not a built-out unit? So these are the things that we're looking at. It's certainly raising consciousness, and it's translating into more units. And even if we get one person, one unit, that's a victory in this housing market today. So we'll continue to work on it. The task force will meet periodically moving forward to check in on goals, and we'll begin collecting some metrics so we can get them back out to people and let them know how we're doing.
Thank you. Any questions from the press on this topic? All right, thank you, press.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.